Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Welcome back to There's No Business Like. I'm Josh Benson. I'm here with my friends Danielle.
Hi there, it's Danielle Van Hook from the Alden in McLean, Virginia.
Brian.
Hey, Brian Zellmer from Kutztown University at Kutztown, Pennsylvania.
Kevin.
Hey friends, it's Kevin Maynard from Quad City Arts.
And Katie.
Hey everyone, Katie Miller with the Midland Center for the Arts in Midland, Michigan.
And I'm with the Marion Cultural and Civic Center in Marion, Illinois. So have you guys ever experienced, even though you know that you're good at what you do, being super nervous or shy about an interaction or being in a room or being in a situation in a way that could potentially hold you back? And if so, how have you overcome that? Or have you?
Yeah, Josh, like every day. I don't know if it's something about being, somebody in the performing arts where you feel like you can kind of like turn it on and then turn it off. But yeah, that imposter syndrome creeps up on me all the time where I feel shy, in maybe like a big networking event or something. It's, I think it's a hard thing to work through for some of us.
Yeah, I'm the same way, Danielle. But I think you're right. It's just that turning it on and doing it. I'll never forget the first time I had to introduce an artist when I was at the Orpheum Theater in Galesburg, Illinois. I was backstage and it wasn't a full house, maybe half full. And I had to go out and, say thank you to the sponsors, introduce the artist. And I was so nervous. I was like pale. I was like really nervous backstage to the point where the artist backstage was going, "You're going to do great. You're going to be great out there." And I was like, I should be telling you that. But it was one of those moments where, I just put one foot in front of the other and just went out there and did it. And it was fine. And I will say I have gotten better at that. I'm less nervous having to talk in front of people, but it was one of those things that I just had to overcome.
I would say, first of all, I feel pretty confident actually talking in front of people I don't know. It's talking in front of people I do know where I have the most issue. So colleagues in a staff meeting or something like that, that makes me really nervous. Quite honestly, like I do a lot of like youth theater teaching and I work with students quite a bit. I actually get the most nervous going in to teach a class because kids can be pretty brutally honest, or they're dragging on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. for a theater dance class or something, and you're getting no response back, no interaction. So I actually get the most nervous and feel the most kind of like out of my element, I suppose, when I'm teaching.
I've always had trouble with intimate conversations. So the fewer the people and the closer proximity I am to people, I start getting enormous anxiety. But I can go on stage and speak to 3,000 people and feel so comfortable. I still feel that way, but I did kind of get pushed. My first APAP, I had a great mentor. Shout out to Martha Woods from Jonathan Wentworth Associates, because she was my mentor at APAP, and we were going right from the first timer session to the reception or something. And she challenged us, everyone at her table, to go up to 10 people that you don't know and introduce yourself. And I was sweating bullets, but I did it, and it got easier the more I did it. So, I still get anxious, but I can do it now, thanks to Martha.
That's really good advice if you're a newbie or not.
I suffer terribly from imposter syndrome on my newest endeavor of being a mural artist. It was, I had painted 6 like huge 60-foot by 30-foot murals before I even referred to myself as an artist the first time. Even though I think I've painted on 13 huge murals now, I still am nervous in talking about it or referring to myself as an artist, or slightly embarrassed when somebody like introduces me as an artist or talks about the mural work that I've done, just because I'm not as comfortable in it. But all of this kind of leads us into the conversation that Brian Zellmer and I sat down with David Wannen of Gilbert and Sullivan Players. And he expresses during this interview one time where he felt really nervous and shy about it. He is a theater leading man, like that is his type. And so to hear him talk about being nervous and shy it really was a little surprising. So enjoy the interview. There's a lot of great gems in this one. We'll talk to you guys about it after.
Hey guys, I'm David Wannen, Executive Director of New York, Gilbert and Sullivan Players.
Hey David, nice to have you with us. Thanks for sitting down for a couple minutes. Can you just explain, in case there's someone who's never heard of Gilbert and Sullivan, what the New York Gilbert and Sullivan Players are?
Sure. So New York Gilbert and Sullivan Players is now in its 48th season. It was founded in 1974. It was co-founded by our current artistic director, Albert Bergeret. And he still works with me every day on the company. We've been touring since 1981. And it is a gem of a company that is sort of old school. We're a repertory company, a true theatrical repertory company. They don't exist. We're an independent, nonprofit producer. We have a home city, New York City season, where we do up to 3-4 productions a year in New York, as well as national touring in Canada and the UK.
I'm guessing that you're not old enough to actually have started with the company. Can you just give us a little background about how you came into where you are today?
Yeah. So I went to the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. And the artistic director of the Eastman School is Stephen Daigle, who is the artistic director of Ohio Light Opera in Worcester. Very well-known company. They do like 70 shows a summer. We call it Opera Boot Camp or Operetta Boot Camp. And that was a big deal to get into that company coming out of college. It's like you're getting into the artistic director's company, summer thing. And that was my first professional job. Many of the people there had performed with NYGASP, New York Gilbert and Sullivan Players, in the city and recommended that I audition. So I did in 2003. I came to the company, to answer your question, I came to the company as an actor-singer. And then I went to Columbia for a year and studied business there. And that's how I melded the two worlds together. The artistic director came and grabbed me at an equity break for 5 minutes, like in rehearsal one day, and said, "Hey, what do you think about coming and working with me in the office?" And I had just been studying all this finance and marketing at Columbia, and I was thinking about changing careers, and I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." And I gave it about a month, and then I said, "Okay." And really, the rest is history. I've been doing this full time ever since.
So that was like your real first big job
Right.
in the industry, and you've stayed with it for so long.
That's
pretty unusual in any industry these days for anyone to stay so long. That's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
What does an office job for a musical theater producing and touring company look like?
Yeah, it's a good question because it's been sort of the evolution of the last decade and a half. I went into the office primarily to help with, pretty standard run administrative stuff, in-house marketing, coming up with plans for advertising and brochures and programs and just good old administrative stuff. But we were represented by Opus 3 at the time, and they had sort of come to a realization that the company could use some more focus, and they actually made the suggestion to Al that he turn it over to me. And it was very cordial and very friendly. And our manager there still to this day comes and sees our shows and is a fan as well. And they were very warm about passing on the torch to me to take it in-house. So to answer Josh, what it looked like was that I sort of took on this whole new career by bringing the representation in-house, and we didn't use an agent anymore, and it was a huge career move for me. It created a job. It created more jobs from there. We've developed, we've added full-time staff and part-time staff since I've been with the company, when it was just really me and Al in the mid-2000s.
And just to clarify, you were also performing with the company, correct?
Right. So I've kept up performing till this day. I'm still the Pirate King in the Pirates of Penzance.
Now, is it hard to separate being the Pirate King from real life and exhibiting those behaviors in real life? Or
yeah, it's kind of funny having this persona of the Pirate King walking around with me at conferences, and there's like always a running joke about that, But yeah, it's fun.
But how do you balance the two? Because I mean, we know a lot of professional artists, and that's their full-time gig. But now you've also got the executive stuff, which I'm also guessing you said you had some schooling in that, but like anyone, I mean, I was a business major, and I still had to learn in the job a lot. Like what were some of the challenges that you had to learn from doing it? As opposed
let's
to
make that two parts.
Yeah, go
Whenever
for it.
you first went into the office to work with Al,
Right.
what were the challenges then? And then move into whenever you broke away from Opus 3 and all of the sudden you were your own agent
Right.
on top of that office stuff, and what getting into the conference world as a new agent
I knew no one,
it was like. And talk us through that.
Yeah. So those two things happened very quickly, but I went into the office and the immediate challenge was to engage the board of directors because, everybody has different people skills, but Al knew that I like people and, could talk to people. So one of the biggest things he asked me to do was just create relationships with the board. And that was fun and rewarding. And I got immediately into that. Also, the office at that time was incredibly technologically, not there. The website was really backwards and old school and needed updating. So I went after a lot of that low hanging fruit initially just to increase the marketing profile of the company, get us up to 20. I was doing email e-blast before they were, when you still had to pay people to do them,
right.
And you still got consultants to do them. I took all that over, and then within a year, my first fall conference was 2007, and I went for this with that consultation a couple times with our manager at Opus 3, giving me a little bit of knowledge of what heads up. But I sent people emails back then and just introduced myself and went into it blind, and I was shy and I was nervous.
Yeah. Which conference was your first?
I believe it was Arts Midwest at Indianapolis or Columbus that year, actually. And then Louisville PAE was another one. And I did Western Arts Alliance the following year. So I got in pretty quick. But it was a lot, but I sort of hit it out of the ballpark my very first year. I did I did $600,000 of touring.
Wow.
And it was a big change from the previous year. So I had a lot of momentum.
So looking at all the years now since then that you've been going to conferences, how much business do you typically get from conferences? How important are conferences versus the other types of bookings you get from however you get them?
The conferences are extremely important for us. We're 45 people on the road. That's something that's very unique, I think.
You'd have to be really
big show.
tightly routed to get that many people everywhere.
Yes.
Well,
tightly routed is a key aspect of our business model.
I bet.
But the conferences, we need to find the people who can afford the full show, and without a doubt, those folks are at conference, and keeping up the relationships is the biggest thing. Just remembering that we're all friends and who, showing up and keeping on people's radar that, oh yeah, they're touring. What are you doing next year? That's just the constant, way it goes. And so I've really enjoyed the touring aspect of the business since I started. In terms of, you asked me how I balance things too. One of the ways I balance is that I stay clear of the artistic direction. So I leave that all to that team, the production team and the artistic director, and now there's an associate artistic director. And as an actor performer, when I come in doing that, they're hiring me for that, and I don't mix it up. I'm coming in as an actor that day, Obviously, sometimes it gets hairy, and sometimes there are things, and sometimes I'm wearing both hats and going back and forth. But I really try to focus. I used my Columbia training and my interest in business as my driver and sort of my guiding star, and then always kept my bass, skills as an actor and singer up, and love that, and just can go into that mode. I guess I can compartmentalize pretty easily and enjoy going back.
That's
and
probably
forth.
vital, important to compartmentalize.
And it also keeps it fresh in both ways. When I'm feeling a little done performing wise, I can go over and just drink coffee and and do spreadsheets and type and
So you said you get the big venues at a conference, and then you go back home, and do you then look at that region and try to reach out to other ones to fill in?
Yes. So I tend to, we have a pretty good database, and I have a great director of administration and box office, Joseph Rubin, who helps me out. And what we do is we send targeted emails with the little bit of routing that maybe we start up at a conference, and it builds out from there. And a lot of times that's where we'll get venues that, need to stretch or whatever, but they want to be a part of the tour. They can do a Tuesday night, a Wednesday night, and that really fills it out. This one that we're doing this spring, it's 13 performances in a row at 12 different venues. So
How does the cold calling work? Or, how do you get someone's attention that you don't know or meet at a conference?
It's gotten a little bit easier, I have to say, because I've had some, you've been around the block, people start knowing you or they hear. And I was president of North American Performing Arts Managers and Agents, and that really helped raise my profile as well. So to some extent, to answer your question, I don't do a lot of cold calling.
Okay.
I do email everybody at the conference personally.
Well,
and
I'm more interested in the people that don't attend a conference.
Right, don't attend the conference.
Yeah.
And so that's where we use some technology. We use for a long time we used personalized emails that go out just to that state, and the subject and the email has routing information about the state. So it's very specific, and I found that to be pretty effective. When I really get going and I need a couple to fill, I'll start getting on the horn and calling.
I want to ask you a question. Going back to your first year at a conference, and that you ended up knocking it out of the park and having a huge touring season,
right?
But yet you said that you were scared and you were shy and you were nervous going in. Can you talk to me about your approach to that first conference that led to that success for you, and what you think made the difference for you in that first conference?
Yeah, I remember going to Columbus and to Louisville, and being like a wallflower. Like I was standing on the side all by myself, knowing no one. I had a recommendation to join Napama before I even went. So I was a newbie, and I had joined based on a recommendation. And that helped because a couple of Napama folks noticed me. And then I literally was walking one night by myself out in Louisville, down the street, the main strip there, and somebody from the conference grabbed me and brought me in. They were all hanging out, having a beer upstairs, and I got taken under their wing. And that gave me, I loosened up and I had fun that week. And that was huge. So it was really the camaraderie and openness of a group of people that I'm still great friends with to this day. Some are still in the industry, some have left. But it was that taking under the wing thing. And there was a lot of mentoring conversations. Jerry Ross and I formed a great friendship early on, and he would mentor me, and I would tell him the challenges and everything I was looking at. And so those conference experiences were huge. Yeah. And I went from, and I struggled, to some extent you have those nerves and you fight that thing for a few years, even though I was doing business, which was great. Also back then, I do have to say, block booking was a little bit more of a thing. Presenters were actually coming to me as 4 of them. And that helped that initial year. Since then, I've noticed the trend is I have to do a little bit more of the legwork myself. But that's okay. It's just, knowing what you have to do to get to it.
In speaking with people on this podcast, a lot of people have mentioned how important the hang is, and not everybody understands that.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, what's the balance of between the formal expo hall, we'll call it, where people are coming to your booth, versus the afterwards hang? How does that play into your strategy or your mix of developing relationships?
I think the hang is quite important for many different reasons. The trend since I've been in the industry, you guys have seen this too, is many people like to schedule their time. They'd like to get out beforehand, get at their iCals and plug in those 15, 30-minute appointments. So that has actually had an effect on the exhibit hall, I think, over time. And the exhibit hall, so when you have meetings, it's a great place. It's a nice business-like environment. You can have all your materials out and you can get down to business. But the discovery has gone down a bit. So enter the hang, right? And an epic part of my experience since 2007 were karaoke parties. And Kevin Spencer, who is a wonderful friend.
Love Kevin.
Yep. Magician, illusionist, teacher, arts educator.
Mentor.
Mentor. He and I, he really produced them, but I was always tagging along, and we would go to the bars and set up the karaoke things with the local places. And those parties, I really enjoyed. And I met a lot of people doing that. And it was kind of like a fun way to, there's a lot of singers out here. There are a lot of agents who are performers. There are a lot of presenters who are past performers. So that was a huge part of the fun, and it has had a big thing. Also, I think that the hang balances out that nerve factor, and like it's hard, it's competitive. It's we always worry about having enough business. Everybody worries about that, right? When you come to these things, the anticipation of, is it I'm spending all this money? Is it worthwhile? Am I going to get that return on investment? And the hang balances that out a little bit, so you blow off some of that steam and you relax into it. And I think relaxing into it is the biggest thing that I've learned over the years.
And talking about your first conference and how you ended up getting pulled in. Well, I guess it was your second conference in
Right.
Louisville when you finally got pulled into that hang.
Right.
What advice would you give to them for their first conference?
I think that there's can be a tendency to get overwhelmed by that worry about return on investment, or about, am I talking to enough people? And you got to think, I was representing just us, just our one thing. So, I knew to not expect as much as maybe the agents who have 30 artists on a roster. But I would say to a person coming into the business, try to show up, but show up well and listen. And you don't have to talk. You can be quiet and smile and have a good time. Try to show up at hangs. Try to smile and introduce yourself to people. And try to relax as much as possible, because that's what's going to attract new relationships. And getting involved in some of something like NAPAMA is a good idea. Getting involved at APAP, staying open and continuing to go back downstairs from the hotel. Don't get trapped up in like, oh, I feel so awful, I'm going to hide in my room.
How does a new person get invited to the hangs? How do they discover them? And that's a tricky thing. I know when you don't know
Right.
anybody, especially, I would guess, especially artists and agents or self-represented artists, because they're kind of stuck alone in the booth. So you're only talking with presenters coming by. How do they get to those?
Well, I
hangs?
think what we're really talking about is networking. And networking is a skill that's separate from selling. It's separate from producing. There are ways to get going. Doing activities like the speed leads, that kind of thing, are a great suggestion for new people. But also, showing up at closing night receptions, introducing yourself to people, and don't be afraid to say, "You guys mind if I tag along?" And if you're not pushy, stay away from pushy is my advice. Reel them in with a gentle, relaxed demeanor. And you can make a lot of friends. And we're all the same people. That's what you also have to realize is the presenters, the agents, the artists, those are just job functions.
Right.
We're truly all the same people. And I really believe that. And you guys know that about me. And
I know it's your interview, but I need to interject.
Yeah.
When you do make it to a hang and you're new, that's not the time to like hard pitch.
right,
either.
exactly. That's what I mean
But
about
it doesn't
the reel
mean
them
the
in and-
business isn't going to happen.
That's right. Soft networking is a skill, and being able to not to know when to hold them, essentially. Know when to just be a part and be friendly and enjoy people. Get to know the people as opposed to talking about everything you do.
I see that a lot with it. You could tell the new people, like even if it's at a round table event thing where people just sit randomly,
Right.
the new people sit there, and they just give you the hard pitch instead of getting to know you.
And there are other things you can do too. I mean, North American Performing Arts Managers and Agents, NAPAMA, runs a retreat every spring often. And that's a great networking thing. You're not really there to sell, but you can meet people, you can enjoy, you can, form relationships, you can create memories. And that's where, what really turns into business down the line.
Brian started to touch on this for new agents and self-represented artists coming in. What is the balance that you see between relational and transactional interaction?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things they say is you really need to come in with a 3 to 5 year timeline of investment of your time and resources to get that return on investment going. So it should be real heavy on the relational side consistently from the beginning, and take expectations way down on the transactional side. Now, that's easier said than done. And we all have people we answer to and budgets and, is it worth it? Questions coming up. But if you go into it knowing that it's going to take that kind of time investment, then you can focus on meeting people, being someone people like to be around, and having fun. And that's what's going to pay off in the long run.
Conferences are very expensive, especially for the artists, the agents. I mean, not only do you have the registration like everybody else, but you have the exhibit hall fees, you've got the showcasing fees if you're showcasing, and so many extra things. And a lot of times there's pressure to sponsor different parts of the thing so you can get your name out there. If you're new, I can understand that pressure of, I've got to sell. But then I've noticed a lot of newbie artists, self-represented artists or agents come in and then they don't sell something and they're like, oh, well, that's not worth it. And they don't give it that long-term chance like you were just talking about. And then, they're always like, oh, well, conferences aren't this or that.
Right.
And yeah, it's just kind of sad. So
Yeah.
So what do you view as the biggest value, is the biggest benefit of being a part of the conferences?
See, there's different trade-offs, and I did some research in the industry, and an agent manager is going to use their relationships that they've built over many years to talk to a presenter about a lot of different artists, right? I'm just, generalizing here. Whereas for us, having the kind of focus on one thing, even though we have different ensembles and different scale productions to offer, because an agent theoretically might actually be able to do everything over the phone. If they're well established enough, a presenter can call up Cami and book their season, or call up another agency and get everything they need. Mm-hmm. But for us, the conferences offered an opportunity to put a focus with a face, and it gave me a world, a stage, if you will, to represent this genre, really, to represent this thing. And I've often gotten, you do Gilbert and Sullivan, and yeah, I mean, I love it. I've loved it since I was 5 years old, but it allowed me to put, myself into this business with a world around it to actually interact with, not just a phone, not just a roster on a screen. And as I said, the hangs have been a big part of it. It created a bit of recognition in the industry, and a lot of fun and a lot of relationships that have been there every year.
If there's an artist out there listening that is interested in maybe wanting to join your company, what do they have to do? Because you're union, right? You're an equity company.
We're an actors equity company. We also employ local 802 musicians for our orchestra in the city. And we're always interacting with labor unions as well on the venues, IATSE. And a singer-actor in our company, generally, we have auditions in the fall. We just had them. Nowadays, since the pandemic, it's kind of streamlined in that you do a self-tape. It's pretty easy to see what we're looking for from self-tapes, and then we bring them in person for callbacks. So we just had that, actually, while we've been here. The team back home was doing those auditions. So, obviously, classical singing is a good experience, but so is the acting. And it's the combination of the two. Like, the top 5% we're looking for have great comedic acting chops, but also have a voice that grabs you immediately. So it's kind of that real crossover artists that we're looking for.
I love that as a result of the pandemic, your audition process has become streamlined.
Yeah.
And that, you know, you have a team and they can independently review the tapes and come back with their input
Exactly.
and decide who's coming in for callbacks.
Yeah.
And then as a team, focus just on callbacks, and it really lessens the investment of time for that team to still get the same product in this.
Yeah. And those callbacks are so much more quality, you know, because they're looking at their dance, they're looking at how they move, they're hearing them live in person for the first time. They're looking at their attitude. A lot of it's attitude. You got to be kind of a company player, you know. One thing we look at, for instance, is, well, are they up for doing ensemble as well as principal roles? Because so many people think that they're only principals coming in. And most of us who have done principals go in and out of the ensemble all the time. It really is that like rep company thing.
I'm sure is there a certain behavior that you see that they're really excellent when they're on the stage, but basically loses the job for them?
Yeah, part of it, one aspect of it would be if they only want to do principal roles and they're not open to being a team player, you know. If there's a lot of attitude in the audition room, that comes through. It's kind of funny, and some people have been crossed off the list right there.
David, I have a time machine. I'd like to bring you back in time to, where should we go, Josh? I was thinking, well, go ahead. You have an idea?
I was thinking when you were part of the company and then you just first came into the business office.
And so you're only going to have a minute or two, but is there any kind of encouragement you'd want to give yourself or a piece of advice that you wish you had then?
Yeah, I would tell that guy who was nervous at the conference to relax a little, that you've got a great thing in front of you. I would also tell myself to not compare myself to others and my business to others because we're so unique, and sort of to relax into that. And to some extent, those coping strategies were, you know, I might have used them back then, but I would tell myself, because I think I went for my first few years sort of going back and forth between doing business and not doing business and doing business, and thinking that something was wrong with what I was doing, and it had nothing to do with it, you know. So relaxing into it, being confident, staying confident, and just and loving yourself, and not you know, allowing the demons to or the insecurities to win the day, because at the end of the day, we're all the same people. We're all in this to keep the performing arts in front of audiences, and keep the artists on the stage doing what they love to do. Sort of staying in that zone would be my advice to myself as a youngster coming in.
Nice.
If there's one thing about our industry right now that would be your favorite thing about this industry, what would it be, and why? Why is that your favorite thing?
You know, I love going when we're at these conferences. I love going to like independent showcases and being blown away by something that I saw that is totally surprising, and I didn't know that I'd be in for that evening. And sometimes you see these artists that are just amazing, and they're I saw a couple last night that were fantastic, but I love being surprised by other artists. I love listening to different kinds of music and getting the opportunity to do that. I love folk music and Appalachian music and Irish music, and that's one of my favorite things to experience here. But the industry in general, I am touched by this every time. It's the people and the friendships that come out of it. So yeah, that's probably my favorite thing, is seeing old friends and continuing to feel continuity and connected to my entire life's work. It's like, there's a real world here, and we support each other.
David, thank you for taking this time to sit with us. I really enjoyed hearing what you had to say.
Thanks, Brian.
We appreciate both you and the Pirate King showing up today.
Very good. See you guys soon. Thank you.
I had a lot of fun talking with David Wannen. He brought up so many interesting topics. One of the things that we talked about just a little bit was routing. And both for agents, artists, and presenters, routing is an incredibly important thing in this industry. Routing is literally how a tour is shaped. Having a tour that lines up with dates that geographically line up to get you from the start of the tour to the end of the tour with as little travel in between as possible is a routed tour. And with a full bus and truck show, like New York, Gilbert, and Sullivan Players has, they are on the road and they have to be very tightly routed. So David Wannen is really good at getting tight routing on these tours because he has so many people out there.
Well, and I just too want to point out that keeping the routing tight isn't oh, I don't want to go across the country. It's financially, it if they have to put so much travel and so much time in between shows, then a tour isn't going to financially work and the tour falls apart.
Right. And as we've heard in some other interviews that we've done already, making that weekly nut, having those expenses covered is really important. But then also on the presenter side of things, knowing what the routing is going to be, and knowing that there are other partners on that route. So, being in Michigan, you really have to work that routing to get people to not go directly from Cleveland to Chicago, to actually make that detour up into Michigan and then come down. So having routing partners in other areas of the country where the geography works, it's outside of your radius clause, you're not going to be crossing audiences. It's actually beneficial as a presenter as well, because that helps make the finances work, to Danielle's point, and honestly cuts down on some expense on the presenter side as well.
It goes to what he was saying about block booking, because he mentioned block booking and people may not know what that is either. And because he talked about how that used to be more of a thing.
For people just, tuning into the podcast and just getting into the industry, exactly what is block booking?
It's where a group of presenters will get together and want to present the same show. And then they approach the agent or the self-represented artist to see about when that can work for the whole block, the group of people.
So essentially, it's a group of presenters presenting routing to the agent or to the artist and saying, we've got part of a route built for you already in this block.
By getting a block together, that saves expenses for the artist because they're going to be in one region and, as Katie mentioned, make their weekly nut easily because of this block. So they save money, and then they could pass that on to the presenters by not having to pay their typical fees. A little bit lower, they get to save a little more. So it works out, in a good block booking situation, it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's a win-win for everybody, but it's hard because if somebody falls out of the block, then that puts more pressures on the presenters that still want to be in it, and more pressure on the agent. But there are some of our wonderful industry service organizations that see how important that is, and they have different programs that will support block booking in a way that really encourages it, and in a lot of ways encourages us to know our not neighbors, but our maybe 100-mile radius friends, because it is just such a good way to support our own industry.
I do think it's become more complicated to block book, though, as our venues take on more and more obligations and roles outside of just being presenters. So you have rentals, you have youth theater programs, you may be doing art exhibits, things like that. And that complicates the schedule. So that makes it more complicated to work with your block booking partners, because our in-house schedules have just become more complicated.
So I also want to take us to something else that David said. We're presenters, but there's agents, artists. It's all a title, but we're all the same people. And that was something that really struck me.
Yeah, I love that he said that.
I also enjoyed just hearing, the agent side of that, of talking about the importance of the hang, doing, sort of that business outside of the expo hall, outside of the conference, because all of us on here fully realize that there's a lot of work that actually happens at those.
Or even just riding the elevator. I mean, how many times someone looked at your badge, like, oh, you're a presenter? And, oh, I'm this, I'm that, blah, blah, blah. And they start, where are you from? Okay. And they start pitching and pitching and pitching. It's like, no, let's get to know each other first. Like, I don't mind, yes, the elevator pitch is a title of a thing, but let's, ease into it. As David says, relax.
Yeah. And you sort of, you realize the people that you want to work with. The people that you get to know them, and you start realizing, where people are, what our different offerings are out there, who you can contact just by these sort of after hour things that aren't necessarily sanctioned by the conference or put up by the conference. And obviously, this right here is a great example of that, because this is all something that is because of outside of a conference hang.
The hang and getting to know each other, and all of that is so important to the relationship building. And that relationship building, David and I, we were supposed to be presenting Pirates of Penzance whenever pandemic hit. And on the second time trying to reschedule that tour, all the dates on the tour and everything else, David called me and he's like, Josh, and he knew he could call me because of the relationship, and just said, hey, I'm really having trouble making it work at the fee that we had for you to fit into the reschedule of the tour. And my first response, just because we have a relationship built and we have vested interest in each other's success, is drop me from the tour, make the tour happen for you. We'll work on it some other time. If we didn't have that relationship, I don't know that would have happened. And I love that him talking about the hang and him talking about we're all the same people really highlights the personal nature and the human nature of our business, that we're all people working and talking together.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to the No Business Like podcast. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. You can find and follow us everywhere at nobusinesslike.com, which has links to all of our socials. Stay in touch, my friends.
And David Wannen is kind of a master of being tightly routed in his tours, because...
Can we get it in one more time, Josh?